All right, we are go. This is my winter weight loss plan to lose 10 to 15 pounds in the next 3 months. I talked about this yesterday, but the time of year people just capitulate, don't they, to that sort of desire to be inside, and understandably so with the weather, but to be inside and wrap up. I'm in my fleece here, aren't I? So I can't talk, but then start comfy eating, get under the blankets, just stick on the Netflix. This is the time when people stop working, they take their foot off the gas and they don't move towards their goals. And then all of a sudden in January, that sort of fickle, almost slightly naive mentality of, well, this is the year. I'm now going to restart. I'm going to get to it. We know what people are like. Let's get a head start on the new year now. That's what I say. Let's buck the trend of the winter weight gain meme. Oh, my winter layers on, putting on winter weight gain or winter fat gain. People just accept and succumb to this time of year being more tempting than others. We've just had Thanksgiving and Christmas, the holidays around the corner, and then the depression of January. This is when people just, health-wise, their habits wreak havoc on their results. But we ain't doing that, are we? That's why you're here. That's why you're watching this, because you're thinking, what can I do here? What can I do to capitalize on this time of year, make sure that I don't slip altogether, and get some decent results right before the summer, right? Some people, they only start thinking at like April, May time, they only start thinking about, oh, can I get in shape for the summer? Do this year round. Do this so you can have the body you want for the next decade or two, not just for freaking summer. And so let's get a head start on the new year. That's my mission, is to give you everything you need. That's my mission for this live stream, to give you everything you need to lose, as I say, 10 to 15 pounds also in the coming months over winter here. Step number one, 90% whole plant foods. I know nothing profound from me here. This is what you're expecting. If you've been following me for some time, you know the approach that has changed my life is eating whole plant foods. I want to stress, not all processed foods are automatically bad. Some people have that view, or that it's as binary that anything that is marginally processed is terrible for weight loss and terrible internally for health and well-being. That's not my view, but it does tend to be that whole foods are lower in calories than processed foods per gram, per ounce, per pound, whatever your chosen unit of measure is. There are exceptions. You will find some processed foods that actually have a lower caloric density than the likes of avocados and nuts and seeds, even though they're whole foods. So it's not just that whole foods equal good for weight loss, processed foods equal bad for weight loss. It isn't quite that simplistic. But for the sake of communicating a simplistic, digestible, clear message here, filling 90% of your plate, bowl, diet overall with whole foods is an incredibly good rule of thumb. Why? Because they actually have nutritional value. You get your carbs, you get your fat, you get your protein, but you also get your fiber and your magnesium and your selenium and your zinc and your iodine. That's harder to come by, but you get iodine, etc., vitamin C, etc., etc., etc. Okay, potassium, so on and so forth. And caloric density is another great advantage on the whole. I spoke about this briefly in the live stream yesterday, but on the whole plant foods tend to have a much lower caloric density than processed foods, certainly than some animal products, most certainly, versus, highly processed, very, very refined junk foods with lots of the added oils and the nasties and the fats and the chemicals thrown in. So as a rule of thumb, basing the majority of your diet on whole foods, you're going to be onto a winner. That doesn't guarantee weight loss. You're going to have to follow the other steps that I'm about to share with you in the rest of this live stream here. But I think that is step number one in communicating. This is the Ryan Adams approach. This is the Slim and Sustain approach. What's it all about? Well, the simplest thing I can tell you is that I base around 90% of my diet when I'm putting together a meal. I want 90% of it to be whole foods. Not every single meal is going to avoid processed foods. There's some stuff that I use processed that isn't as bad. Examples being healthy cereals. You guys know I love my bran flakes. Muesli isn't all that processed, but certainly my bran flakes, sort of shredded wheat-esque products, not necessarily the shredded wheat brand, but shredded wheat-esque products. They can be really good as well. Even though they're processed, they can still be high in fiber, low in caloric density, very therefore weight loss friendly, but they're processed, right? Doesn't that mean they're bad? No, because they conform to the other criteria for deciding how effective, for measuring how effective a food is for weight loss. Satiety as well, a really important thing. Bran flakes, I personally find incredibly filling. I can eat a huge bowl of bran flakes because of their low caloric density, not having actually consumed all that many calories, and I am more full comparatively than the same amount of oats, even for a greater amount of calories. So, there are some processed foods that are really advantageous. That's the point I'm trying to make. Whole wheat pastas or bean or lentil pastas I will use from time to time. Well, I say from time to time, you can have them very regularly. Lots of my clients are eating these things on a daily basis. The breads, whole wheat, rye bread, bit of sourdough from time to time, right? These are technically processed foods. They're not intact, right? They have been messed around with. They're still fantastic for weight loss, but 90% of my diet, as I say, is whole plant foods. But how does that break down? We come on to step number 2 here, where I want to talk to you about carbohydrate sources. First myth I want to bust is that carbs are automatically fattening. I want to destroy this misconception that weight loss is going to come down to your balance between the macronutrients. Our macronutrients, if you're new to this, being carbohydrates, protein, and fat. A lot of people place so much emphasis on, oh, you need a high protein diet, you need low carbs, you need no fat, maybe you need a keto approach with all the fat, right? There's a lot of contrasting opinions out there on precisely, and methodologies on precisely what is the best way to lose weight. But all of this emphasis constantly on macronutrients. People talk about protein all the time and carbs this and carbs that. You should have this much, this much, this much. What about fat? No, it's healthy fat, right? It's not just bad. And then the high carb vegan saying, oh, the fat you eat is the fat you wear. None of it is that straightforward. And in fact, in that whole conversation about macronutrients, what is constantly missed is the importance of calories. And people don't like talking about calories. It's a little bit boring. It's tedious. They get the impression that just because I talk about calories, that means that I advise you have to count calories, which I don't, for the record. And we'll talk about my method for that in very shortly. So don't worry, we're going to cover that in a second. But calories are so crucial. They're still a really, really important metric for weight loss. And it's not that the entirety of your success with weight loss is going to be predicated on calories, but it largely will be. And you better damn well respect that. And you just following a plant-based diet isn't a guarantee that you're in a sensible calorie deficit and therefore going to lose weight. Or if you're trying to gain weight, for instance, that you're in a sensible calorie surplus. Does that make sense? So calories really are a brass tacks bottom line that I think a lot of people miss because they're constantly overemphasizing the importance of macronutrients. Don't get me wrong. Macronutrients are crucial. Thinking about the amount of protein, carbs, fat you're eating is really, really important, but it is secondary, I argue. If you're to sort of rank the factors that make or break weight loss, it is most macronutrients are most certainly secondary to the importance of calories. Make sense? So, with all of that outlined, can you see now why, if you're in a calorie deficit, eating high carb or low carb, you're going to lose weight? Okay, you might lose more weight with one approach, and that's when we get into the more advanced sort of nuances of this whole conversation about how much macronutrients matter in terms of results on the scale. But generally speaking, calories are going to make or break your success most of all. And so hopefully me just sort of hearing my stance there on how I rank these factors that affect weight loss, calories being more important than macronutrients, hopefully that just gives you a bit of peace of mind that, oh, okay, all that fear I had around carbohydrates, as long as my calories are in check, it doesn't even matter. That said, I do want you to have healthy whole food sources of carbohydrates. And that's why my preferred carb sources going into this winter are going to be whole grains, such as brown rice and quinoa and barley and millet and whole wheat couscous and what else? Buckwheat, for example. Oats, I forgot oats, one of the most popular ones. Potatoes, whether it's regular white potatoes, sweet potatoes, purple sweet potatoes, Japanese sweet potatoes. I don't tend to have those. They're not as findable in the UK. They're not sourceable, accessible in the UK, but they're all very, very good as well. And, things like, as I say, sometimes the more processed stuff like the bran flakes, the healthy cereals, the whole wheat pasta, etc., etc. But it's mostly going to be, potatoes and whole grains. Those are mostly going to contribute the carb sources to my diet. And how can I, of course, forget fruits and vegetables, which a lot of people don't realize how high vegetables are in carbohydrate as well, but certainly fruit, people know that, but because of the sugar content, but plenty of fruits and vegetables in my diet as well. They are healthy. And I just very briefly, this is a can of worms, maybe for another live stream. I mean, I've covered it. I want to say 1,000,000 times, that's a gross exaggeration, but I've covered it plenty, I think, in my estimation. But, this whole sugar and fruit thing, I mean, to draw any comparisons between the natural sugars in fruit that are found, coming along with, fiber and other wonderful nutrients and the phytochemicals and, anti-inflammatory properties in fruit, the antioxidants, et cetera, to compare the sugars in fruit and all that fruit brings to the sugars in, our sodas, our candies, our, ice cream, et cetera, et cetera. It's just worlds apart. It's worlds apart. So it's a ridiculous comparison. But those are my preferred carb sources. And that's what I'd be leaning on, going through these winter months. And I would not do a carb restricted approach. I would understand that it's mostly about calories, but I would still follow a high carbohydrate diet, which is kind of easy and natural when you eat a plant-based diet anyway, because so many plant foods are rich in carbohydrate, but not to an amount where I think you need to be worried about, is this too many carbohydrates? So there is such a thing as having too many carbohydrates, but it's more so about, what you'll displace from your diet. It's not that those carbohydrates from the right sources are inherently unhealthy, or there's a certain percentage of consumption, there's a certain amount of consumption of them that is automatically unhealthy if you're still maintaining a healthy body weight range, and if they're clean source of carbohydrate. There isn't necessarily an obvious point of too much carbohydrate, but when you factor in what it might displace in your diet, so if you're having so much carbohydrate that you don't get very much fat and protein, then we can objectively say, okay, you might have too many carbs in your diet. Not because carbs are terrible, but because, hold on, you got so many carbs in your diet, you're kind of missing the value here of maybe some more beans in your diet. They're relatively high in carbohydrate as well, but having some more obvious overt protein sources and some fat sources in your diet. Does that make sense? So let's strip away that carb phobia. We want to be looking at whole grains. We want to be looking at potatoes, a little bit of pasta, those processed cereals, etc., which are still good, healthy, weight loss friendly carb sources. And that's what they would be contributing the carbohydrate intake to my meals. Protein sources, tofu, love it, love the stuff. Lentils, beans, peas. TVP is another really lean source of protein that doesn't come with much fat, unlike the likes of tofu, for example. Some people are really fearful about the fat in tofu. So long as you're not having pounds and pounds of the stuff, it's not going to be a great contribution of fat to your diet anyway. And tofu is surprisingly calorically sparse because of how spongy it is anyway. So, even though the fat count in tofu looks on the label relatively high, when you actually factor in how much you're using, it's not a huge contribution of fat to your daily diet. But if you are worried about that, or you already have quite a lot of fat elsewhere in your diet, something like TVP, I don't like it that much, but something like TVP can be a wonderful way of getting protein without getting lots of the fat, like in the soy derivatives. I haven't included tempeh in this list of protein sources, plant protein sources. It's not because I'm not a fan of tempeh, I am. It's because of the caloric density. And, this is a weight loss plan. And that, bottom line, you could be in a calorie deficit and you can eat a bunch of tempeh. And as long as you're in a calorie deficit, you're going to lose. So I want to be careful not to sort of put any food here in a category of, I can never eat this again. Oh my goodness. Because tempeh is a really good health food and it's got so many properties. But compared to the other protein sources that I've listed, its caloric density is pretty darn high. So it is something that you can't be as liberal with as you can with beans and lentils. And so feel free to use tempeh, but just understand you're going to get quite a small amount comparatively for the same amount of calories that are provided when you eat chickpeas or red kidney beans or lentils or tofu or TVP. Does that make sense? Or even seitan. I forgot to include that on this list, but that's really good protein source as well, so long as you're not gluten intolerant, of course. So those are my preferred protein sources. Once again, tofu, lentils, beans, TVP. Okay, tempeh, but be slightly more cautious with it. Seitan, brilliant. And I would be wanting to have these protein sources 2 to 3 times a day, as I have my clients doing. Okay. So, if you were doing it from beans, you'd want to have a serving of beans twice a day. So 2 servings of beans a day. What's a serving of beans? Well, that's incredibly relative. It's incredibly relative to your particular nutrition needs. But for a lot of the people I work with, it tends to be about 2/3 of a cup, which plays out to about half a can of beans. That equates to about 1 serving. So you can think of it like, okay, I'm going to try and make my way through a can of beans a day, or I'm going to have half a can of beans and I'm going to have 5 ounces of tofu, half a can of beans and I'm going to have a cup and a bit of green peas, garden green peas, for example. These are going to be decent protein sources for you. And I recommend, as I say, 2 to 3 times a day, you're having one of these more overt protein sources. Protein isn't something that needs massive worry about, despite what a lot of the people critical of veganism and plant-based diets will say. Protein isn't something that needs massive emphasis, so long as you're not doing a really, really sort of 80-10-10 style, really ultra high carb approach. You'll get protein. And I'm just talking about overt protein sources as well. And if you really struggle, or if you're breastfeeding right now, or you do have muscle building ambitions, you can always take a relatively clean protein powder like the Sun Warrior range, for instance. They're a really concentrated form of protein. So that's a really good way. I'm not automatically anti-supplementation. I do think from whole foods is the smartest rule of thumb, because we don't know about absorption, all that much yet about how effective absorption, nutrient uptake is from, protein powders versus whole food sources. We don't know a great deal yet, but these can be a great supplement. You don't want to base all of your protein on protein powder. You don't want that to be your entire protein source day in, day out, multiple times a day, but certainly a good supplement as a supplement to the whole food sources, right? So you could always use one of those. There was something else I was going to say on the protein sources thing, but forgive me. That was it. You'll pick up protein elsewhere. You'll pick up protein. There's a surprising amount of protein in oats, for example. You pick up a little bit of protein in mushrooms. These minuscule amounts to some degree, a bit in bread, a bit in rice, etc., etc. So yeah, I talked about over, contributors to protein in your diet, but just understand you're also going to pick up bits here and there. And that's going to, having a very balanced diet is also going to take care of the amino acid fear that some people have as well when they transition to this way of eating. Fat sources, we've done our carb sources, we've done our protein sources, we've done our fat sources. If you have just tuned in, if you're watching the live stream, you might be watching the replay, but forgive me, for those watching the live stream, you can go back to the start and you can get every step here I'm working through. But we're on our fat sources right now. Before this, we covered good carbohydrate sources on plant-based diet, protein sources, and my sort of ratio methodology with how many whole foods you should be eating versus processed foods. I also covered which processed foods are the exception to the rule and are actually still very healthy and weight loss friendly. So go back the last 10, 15 minutes or so and check that stuff out before you continue. But fat sources, nuts, seeds, including tahini, avocado, very popular one, of course. My clients, they just cannot believe it when I write avocado toast into their meal plans and tell them the amount of avocado and toast they can use. And I just watch their eyes light up. They're like, wow, that's amazing. So nothing to be feared in these fat-rich plant foods. You just cannot eat them anywhere near as liberally, sadly, as you might, because the contribution in calories they bring compared to, and there's also the question of sort of fat in the bloodstream, et cetera, even though that's lessened with plant sources of fat. But I've done it again, lost my train of thought. Sorry, folks. So you cannot be as liberal, but they're still included. It just needs to be managed. It just needs to be controlled. So what was I saying? Nuts, seeds, including tahini, avocado. I like, and my clients tend to like tahini and cashew-based dressings. A lot of people like that. They're all the rage, the salad dressings. So yeah, a little bit of fat on the diet. And if you need a rule of thumb for how much to use, I'll tell my clients exactly what to use. I know with myself exactly through feedback from the scales and trial and error over the years. I know exactly now the right portioning of fat in my diet, but just as a simple rule of thumb to give you something to help you implement here so I'm not just too vague, focus on around 10% of your plate, I would say, in terms of volume. This is not in terms of calories, but in terms of volume of your plate, about 10% of that plate being one of these more overt rich foods. So if you're having a big bowl of oatmeal, ask yourself, okay, let's say, for example, this is a really simplistic way of doing it. Let's say, for example, in this entire bowl of oatmeal and berries and all that sort of thing, I've got 10 tablespoons worth of food volume. Well, I'm going to make sure one of those is something that's more fat rich. So I'm going to throw a tablespoon of chia seeds on there. Does that make sense? And then you want to do that about twice a day. 2 to 3 times a day, you're having these fat sources with most meals. Not necessarily everyone, but with most meals, you're getting one of these more overt rich. Healthy fat sources into your diet, and the healthy fats do all sorts of things for blood and brain and hair and nails and not to mention the omega-3s, the omega-6s, the omega fatty acids, which they really, really are important in managing inflammation. And I think also a DHA supplement, EPA, omega-3 supplement, to be clear. Omega-6 is very easy to get on a plant-based diet, but omega-3 less so. So I think to cover yourself by taking an algae-based omega-3 supplement would be very, very wise as well. But if you're eating plenty of these, plant fat sources to the degree to which, they don't contribute a huge amount of calories to your diet and therefore take you out of that all-important calorie deficit, you're going to be fine. But I think a DHA EPA supplement is there as an insurance policy, just to be sure. Next step I want to talk about here is, this is tricky because it's highly subjective, and there's a lot of things internally that can block your decision-making on this, but without building out too much. This rule of eating until you're satisfied but not stuffed, which, who did I hear that say first? It might be McDougall. But altogether, it's something that many teachers across the diet spectrums sort of will advocate as a soundbite that you'll hear from lots of people. And I like it. Eat until you're satisfied but not stuffed. Now, like I say, there's subjectivity involved in this, and there's all sorts of bad habits, poor relationships with food that can sort of block you from that level of intuition. It is hard initially. Let's say you're somebody that's overeaten for years. I'm sat here, all high and mighty. Now I've lost the weight, saying, "Oh, just eat until." Very simply, I'm saying, just eat in a blasé manner. Just eat until you're satisfied, but not stuffed. No problem. You'll lose weight. You're thinking, what does that mean, right? I've been overeating for years. What on earth does that mean, right? I know it's tricky, but it's just a basic mantra that I want you to carry forward that can increase your awareness right now when you sit down for that next meal and you've got this motto in your head of I'm going to eat until I'm satisfied, but not stuffed. It can really help you assess, the last few spoonfuls of the fruit last few spoonfuls of your oatmeal, or last couple of bites of the fruit you're eating, or last few sips of the smoothie. Do I really need this? Do I really, really need this? Or have I already hit the spot and I'm just going because there's a bit more food in there, or because I had a long day and I'm feeling a bit low? And again, this was something I covered in yesterday's live stream, I think, but just trying to bring a little bit more mindfulness and intentionality to when you're sitting down and eating a meal, to make sure that you're not overeating. You could put that forkful and spare yourself 80 calories a day per meal very, very easily. And that's something that's going to really help. If necessary, that's going to really help your weight loss efforts. We don't want you to undereat, but that is something that could likely very much help your weight loss efforts by being a lot more mindful of these things. So trying to eat until we're satisfied, but not totally stuffed. Now, again, if you're eating like voluminous, low calorie density plant foods, you might still be able to eat until you are literally stuffed to the brim and still lose weight, because technically you're in a calorie deficit. So this is why this is just a mantra, right? It's just a motto, and there are exceptions to this, but I like it as a rule of thumb. I like it as just a very easy, quick, conceptual thing that people can start thinking about when they sit down for their next meal. With that said, and with the complications of that listed, how I've just said, well, technically, you could eat till you're stuffed and still lose weight if the calories are right, or you could eat not until anywhere close to your stuffed and to being stuffed. And if you're eating like junk foods, then you'll gain weight, even though you're nowhere near full, satisfied, or stuffed. So as I say, there are exceptions to this, and that brings me on nicely to my stance on counting calories here. Now, if this was me, I don't want to lose weight right now, but this is my winter weight loss plan that I'm outlining for you guys. You can take what you like from it and run. You might not agree with all of it. It might not work for you. You might have tried similar things in the past and think, I don't really like that, Ryan, but I like 2 or 3 of the other things you said. Fair enough. That doesn't matter. You don't need to take it as a package. This is my winter weight loss game plan here. What I would do is I would not, and I didn't when I lost weight, but I would not count calories. Unless, this would be the caveat, and I didn't even do this years ago, but this is what I do now if I wanted to lose weight, regardless of winter, summer, whatever. I would not count calories unless I stopped losing weight. So as soon as I wasn't falling into that 1 to 2 pounds per week ballpark, I would then, for a couple of days, as an experiment, track my calories on nutrition tracking software like Chronometer or MyFitnessPal. I used to use MyFitnessPal years ago when I was doing all my flexible dieting nonsense. Haven't touched it since, but no, that's not true. Actually, I've looked at it for clients since. It is useful. I like Chronometer a bit more nowadays. I'm familiar with MyFitnessPal from years ago, but I actually like Chronometer, and I have used that more in recent years when I'm doing nutrition planning for clients. So on Chronometer, I would look at 2 to 3 days worth of my calorie intake. I'd be adding everything in there, and everything. Right, everything, the Starbucks coffees, not that I drink them, but for you guys, the Starbucks coffees, and all that spoonful of peanut butter I had before my next Zoom meeting because I just needed something to eat. I'd be thorough and I'd be fair with it, and I'd track everything on there, and I'd see where I might be going wrong. Am I over what the calculator tells me would be maintenance calories? Am I not actually in that much of a deficit right now, even though I'm eating really healthy plant foods? It's very possible that you follow the steps I'm outlining here and you're still not in a calorie deficit because your portions are too large, because maybe you didn't quite get the fat component right. Maybe your diet's a bit rich in fat, therefore contributing calories, like we talked about earlier on, more calories than the carbohydrates and the protein. There might just be steps. You might just overall be eating too many calories despite eating very clean. You might be checking the other boxes that I'm sharing, that I'm walking through in my steps here, scratching your head thinking, why am I not losing weight? I'm doing everything. Ryan's been live for 25 minutes. I've done everything he said. For a couple of weeks now, I'm not losing weight. Why? Well, you're probably just consuming too many calories overall. You're probably consuming too many calories overall. And so things like Chronometer, MyFitnessPal, a little 2 to 3 day experiment when you do track your calories. You don't need to do it for the rest of your life, but it can be incredibly illuminating. From that then can then inform you, do I need to lose a few calories in my diet? What do I need to do next? I'm not going to cover particular strategies on how many calories you should be eating, what deficit you should be in, how many calories to lose from your diet if you're in a plateau. I have covered those things in other videos, other live streams over recent months. I can think of one back towards the start of the year where I broke this whole process down as well and used some calorie counting software, pointed you to some calorie counting software online. So you'll have to do a bit of digging around to find these videos. I can't remember the titles of them, but I have covered this stuff in reasonable. Yeah, and there was 2 to 3 months ago, did I drop a couple of videos on how to overcome plateaus? Yes, I did. Not even live streams, but just short 2 to 3, 4, 5 minute videos. So I've covered this stuff to death, I think, really, in fairness. And also, it's tricky because it's very relative. It's very individualistic. You know, how many calories you should be eating is so ridiculously relative to you that for me to sit here and say, all women should eat X amount of calories, well, it would be absolutely laughable. It would be shocking advice. So that's the benefit of obviously working with me directly, because I can program this all into your meal plan so you don't even have to think about the calories, with the peace of mind that Ryan has calculated the right calorie deficit for me. But anyway, I can't do that for you unless I'm having a conversation with you one-on-one, working with you one-on-one. Does that make sense? So I'm just trying to give you some rules to work with, but you yourself going and using Chronometer or MyFitnessPal and trying to sort of, and the calorie counting software, not calorie counting software, but maintenance, BMR, software over at omnicalculator.com. This could all be very, very useful for you to see, oh my goodness, okay, I'm eating really cleanly, but you know what? I think I'm probably eating a bit too much. I've tracked my calories here. I've stopped losing weight. It looks like I'm eating a little bit too much. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize all that peanut butter I was eating was contributing 300 calories to my daily diet. Maybe I should start there and reduce that. So it can be really illuminating and showing the big contributors of calories to your diet. And then you can start thinking about how to troubleshoot those things. So as I say, back to the original point, I would not actually count calories in this winter weight loss game plan unless I hit a plateau. Then I would do it, and then I would integrate the necessary steps to actually then get through that plateau. Once I'm losing 1 to 2 pounds a week again, I'd stop sweating it. I wouldn't worry about looking or tracking the calories until it then stopped again. Obviously, you need to be vigilant. I talk about this idea of not having to count calories, but being calorie conscious. It just means having a little bit awareness and a little bit of understanding that, there's roughly X amount of calories in a cup of rice. And once you've done a little bit of tracking yourself, you start to understand this stuff. It doesn't mean you have to track calories for the rest of your life. That's not in my protocol. It's something I did for 18 months, pretty much every single day. And I am very glad that I don't need to do that again. But I think actually towards the latter end of my plant-based weight loss phase, I actually think I probably would have lost weight faster and more efficiently had I been willing to just, break that stigma that I had in my mind of, the neuroses that comes with tracking calories and how it can affect your relationship with food, which are all valid arguments. Like, it is neurotic, and I don't think it necessarily helps with most people's relationship with food long term to have to track their calories day in, day out. So it's not as though my reasons for not counting calories are completely invalid. I think they were very legitimate, but I was really stubborn on, no, I'm never doing that again, when really I probably would have lost that final sort of 10 pounds on a plant-based diet a whole lot faster if I just accepted, okay, I'll just do this for a couple of days and see where I stand. So that would be my advice on that. But for the rest of the time, if you're losing in that 1 to 2 pounds per week ballpark, of course there are exceptions, but generally that's about the rate of returns that my clients are seeing right now without us pushing it too hard, and they can feel happy and satisfied and not deprived at all and still lose a really nice, it's fairly excitable to them 1 to 2 pounds a week. You don't need to actually track your calories to do that. Well, that's a lot of the food stuff. Let's talk about exercise. Now, it's assumed, certainly if you're in the northern hemisphere, it's assumed that the cold weather has come. That brings frost and snow and ice for many of us. Today was the first morning where I had to de-ice my car, defrost my car this winter. So it's coming, right? Whether I like it or not, it's coming. And I have just also, for me, this really hits home for me because I've just moved out of the city, as many of you know. I'm just slightly now outside of my sort of town, city centre area. And so I'm doing less steps than I used to when I lived my apartment in the city. I'd just walk out and walk, go to the stores and go and see friends, walk to training and etc. Walk to play some tennis, whatever. If there was anything I need to do at the bank, post office, whatever, I would just very easily get, between 5 and maybe 10,000 steps on a given day, range, but 5 to 10,000 steps. It wasn't hard for me to get a decent amount of activity in just from walking alone, beyond, all the sports that I enjoy to play nowadays. And so now I'm outside, the weather's getting cold. There's not as many places for me to easily just sort of pop out for a walk. I can go around my block here, and there's a couple of places a short drive away where I could have a little hike and a little walk, and I'll do that occasionally. But with the weather, it is like, realistically, it's off-putting, and you can try and overcome those excuses like, get on with it. And like, that is how I think, and that is what I do most of the time. I'm just like, who cares about the weather? Let's just go out for a walk, get some steps in, a little 20-minute walk in the evening after you've been sat doing emails all day, answering clients all day, doing YouTube, Instagram stuff all day. Yeah, I do still do that, but no way near. It doesn't contribute the amount of steps that just naturally living in a city did for me before. And so, long story short, this one really resonates with me. And then the cold weather as well compounded. So, because of my relocation, it resonates with me with the cold weather compounded. You get what I'm saying? So we have to think a little bit differently. If I'm not burning as many calories from steps, if I'm not improving my metabolic rate because I'm not doing as many steps, what am I going to do? And for you, you should be asking, okay, what am I going to do? The weather's getting cold. I can't be outside. I'm not going to be realistically outside as much. What am I going to do? And I would say the simple solution to this is, if you've got a sport that's indoor, that's great. And maybe you can sort of skip over some of the stuff I'm sharing here. If you're doing that sport 2 to 3 times a week, that's great. That's good. A little bit of walking on top of that, you'll be fine. This will be enough to support what we're doing with the food, so you can lose, 10 to 15 pounds in the next couple of months or so, as I promise here. But for most of us, the simple thing to do is going to be more home workouts in this time. I would say, depending on your current fitness level, depending on your current schedule, 3 to 5 home workouts weekly of about 15, 20 minutes. It doesn't take loads. Obviously, if that's too easy for you, you can go a bit higher. But generally, I'm trying to cater to my audience here. 3 to 5, 3 being on the lower end if you're really new to sort of to working out, moving your body beyond just a little bit of walking. Then let's start with 3 weekly workouts, about 20 minutes in length, consisting of basic body weight, strength, and cardio movements. So we're thinking of things like jumping jacks and high knees and jogging on the spot and punches in the air, and then strength stuff being squats and holding forearm planks, great for the core, sit-ups and lunges and push-ups. And maybe even some easy resistance band stuff as well, to just provide a bit of resistance. Now, if you're at a gym and you know what you're doing, lifting weights, that's fine. Again, you can skip over this. But I'm thinking realistically, even when the weather's cold, people don't want to walk to their car, sit in their cold car while it's warming up while they're driving, and then go to the gym and then come back at night when it's dark outside. Like, people don't even go and do indoor sports as much in the winter. The data very clearly shows that. So I think the solution for everyone is home workouts. And I don't think home workouts are sustainable forever. It's one of the biggest criticisms, my own self-criticisms of my program of Slim and Sustain, is I put my clients through a couple of months of home workouts. And I've always thought, I don't like this, because that's not true. Obviously, it's there for a reason, so I do love it, and mostly clients will. It can be a struggle for them if they're not used to it, but mostly clients love it, and as soon as they've done a couple of weeks and they see their progress and they see their fitness and their strength improving, they kind of get addicted to the process of doing the home workouts. But I don't like the idea of making this a main source of movement for people, because working out at home is not quite the right environment. It does get a little bit boring. There isn't enough people around. It's better when there's some sort of social aspect to it and some accountability, and you're out there, maybe outside in nature, doing something sporty with other people. I think that is going to be more sustainable. I've always said that the best forms of exercise for folks are the ones, quite obviously, it's nothing profound, the ones that they'll actually do consistently for the rest of their lives. And that tends to be a sport. There's a lot of people at my tennis club who are 50, 60 years old, and they've been playing tennis for 20, 30, 40 years in some cases. And, there are sports that there's a lot of injuries in tennis when you get to a serious level, but there are sports that have longevity to them, and picking one of those that's kind of fun and interactive and involves other people, I think that's a great form of exercise to do a couple of times a week. And you really get hooked on that because there's so many benefits. Do home workouts have that longevity? No, of course they don't. But We are just talking about my winter weight loss plan. This is only something you need to do in the cold months. And then you can go out to a gym or you can go and do this XYZ sport, which is you're going to be more likely to do when the sun is shining a little bit, when it's lighter in the evenings, when other people are more interested in doing sports as well. So I think in the meantime, 3 to 5 of these home workouts a week, basic, as I say, body weight, strength movement, mountain climbers, so some aerobic stuff. They're pretty tough actually, but doing a couple of these will really assist with, a great nutrition protocol and help ensure that you're in that calorie deficit. Now I want to talk about Christmas. Now, if you're watching this in a year's time, or let's say more specifically, 11 months' time, you might also be thinking about Thanksgiving or Canadian Thanksgiving, in 10 months' time, et cetera, et cetera. But, you can really extrapolate this out to any sort of holiday or celebration in your calendar or your religious traditions as well. But let's talk about Christmas, since today is December 1st, as it's coming up. Me personally, I wouldn't worry, and this is going to be my approach this year, as it is pretty much every year. I wouldn't worry about Christmas Day itself. I'll just do whatever. I consider it a write-off. It's the only day of the year where I have a cheat day. Okay, I don't like cheat day. It signifies all the wrong things. It signifies that you hate and want to escape your diet. So I don't feel, and I can hand on heart say the rest of the year, I don't feel the need to have a cheat day. But on Christmas itself, I just consider it a write-off. That said, I am so much, my relationship with food, how I think about food, how I use food now is, albeit not perfect, is so much healthier than it was 5-10 years ago. Yeah. So when Christmas comes and I'm thinking, I get to have a couple more indulgent things. I'll have a bit of vegan chocky and I'll do a bit of this and I'll have my healthy nut roast sort of Christmas dinner, which is very clean. But, there's a lot of oil in the gravy that I'm throwing on it. And, I'm going to have a slice of cake after and I'm going to have a bit of vegan chocky. And in the evening, I might have a bit of vegan cheese and crackers and pickle in British tradition. And I'll do that and it will be guilt-free. That one day is the one day a year where I have several things over the day that are definitely not compliant with the Slim and Sustain, Ryan Adams sort of protocol. I hate talking about, I was going to say I hate talking about myself in the third person. I love talking about myself in the third person. Arrogant barstool. What an arrogant barstool I am. No, but the Ryan Adams philosophy anyway, let's say. So yeah, that's the only day of the year where I'll intentionally do that. I'll just consider it a write-off. Now, it's up to you what you do. You could, we're talking about setting up a game plan for the next few months. If you have one day on Christmas Day where you eat 3,000 calories when really you should be eating 2,000, that's not going to do anything. That one day in the grand scheme of 3 months where you're making brilliant strides, even if not perfect all the time, but brilliant strides towards your goal, that one Christmas day, it's not going to ruin anything. It's a drop in the bucket in terms of the overall calories you're consuming, the overall nutrition in those 2 to 3 months, right? So if you want that day to be a cheat day, that's not me necessarily saying, I don't want to encourage bad habits, but that's not me saying you should do that. But I wouldn't sweat it. If you do decide to do that, I wouldn't sweat it. Here's the problem. It's the slippery slope that comes with people. So they have all those things around Christmas and then it seeps over to the new year and into January a little bit. And then they've got that taste for junk food again. I can do it because I'm controlled. I trust myself. And I get to the end of Christmas Day and I'm like, give me a bit of fruit for goodness sake. Get me back to the muesli and bran flakes bowls that I like to have, first thing in the morning on the 26th. And I'm back to it. No hesitation. In fact, I really want to it's not just that I'm back to it. I really I'm eager to get back to it after having some foods that don't make me feel as good. And if that's what you're going to do, again, I don't want to encourage bad habits, but I wouldn't sweat it too much. I really wouldn't if that's your one sort of blowout, let's say. As long as you don't go too crazy and indulge in the binging behavior and that sort of thing, I wouldn't sweat it all that much. However, what some of my clients are going to do is they're just going to have one off-plan meal on Christmas Day. And they're going to wake up, they're going to have one of my breakfasts, one of my lunches, and then they're going to have whatever they want for Christmas lunch or Christmas dinner itself. But then they're back to my plan for the other meals. Some clients, they will have one of my breakfasts. They'll have a Christmas lunch that is actually still very compliant. Maybe it's one of my recipes for a Christmas-esque dish or forks over knives thing. And so they're actually clean eating all day long. It's not particularly their meal plan, but they're still eating very cleanly. But they're going to have a slice of cake or a little bit of dessert, an extra 200 or 300 calories on top of what they'd usually have. Not enough to cause fat gain, but just, a little treat, let's say. And that's what maybe you would like to do. It really, this is kind of an obvious statement, it's preference. Obviously, it's preference because this is your plan. This is what you choose to do. But I'm just trying to sort of give you a full range of options here that are all going to be reasonable and not actually disrupt your progress. But again, this is, like I said earlier, this is my plan, right? You take from it what you will, you adjust it as you need to. But this is my winter weight loss plan. This is what I would do if today I wanted to make sure that if today, this is the contradiction, over the next couple of months I wanted to lose weight. But starting today, this is what I do. And for Christmas itself, I'd have that cheat day over Christmas. But the 2 to 3 days surrounding Christmas, let's say 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, I'd make room for one more indulgent thing per day to be realistic. A little vegan mince pie, a little bit of chocolate cake, a little bit of this, a bit of that, a little bit of vegan ice cream. I would make room for that in my diet by taking out my usual snacks. So every day at the moment, I'm having 2 to 3 snacks a day. A little bit of fruit between meals, hummus and cucumber on toast. What else have I been having lately? Oh, my dried edamame beans and roasted chickpeas that I just love snacking on. Every now and again, I'll do nuts and seeds or whatever. Maybe a tiny bowl, a very small bowl of bran flakes, just with a small handful of raisins or blueberries on, with a bit of plant milk, a touch of stevia for a little bit of sweetness. These are the snacks that I very often do, and I'll do this 2 to 3 times a day between breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I would take those away, therefore saving anywhere between, for me, sorry to talk about calories again, but just to put this into context, and you can see how useful this is. That would then say, for me, you might not need 2 to 3 snacks a day. I certainly didn't when I was losing weight. It's only now I'm maintaining. But even if it's just one snack a day you're having, you might save 100, 120, 150 calories by not having that snack or snacks. And then you can put that towards a more indulgent, thing. And I don't want you to get in this habit of eating bad food and justifying it because you're fitting it into your diet. That's just basically then flexible dieting. And that's not my MO. That's not what I agree with. That's not what I believe in. It's not the ideology here that I enjoy and I promote. However, for the sake of these couple of days and doing something a little more indulgent and going with the flow and enjoying yourself a bit, this can be a great way to compensate for that more rich thing. Cut the snacks out of your diet. Another alternative that I talk about is doing maybe a slightly smaller breakfast. Maybe your breakfast usually equates to about 400 calories. Instead, okay, today it's the 24th, it's Christmas Eve, for goodness sakes. I'm going to have a vegan mince pie, turn over the packet. Okay, there are 120 calories. I'll do a bit of a smaller breakfast today. I'll do a few less oats today. I'll take it down from 1 cup to maybe 2/3 of a cup of oats. And that will create a little bit of wiggle room for that mince pie so I don't need to sweat it. Does that make sense? So you can do almost this compensatory thing a couple of days around Christmas. So lots of options there. I appreciate I've just thrown a bunch of different things at you. Assess what will work best for you. Are you going to have Christmas Day as a blowout? Do you just maybe have one little thing on Christmas Day, a couple of things surrounding? Maybe you're perfectly clean. 23rd, 24th, 24th, 26th. 27th, you're on your plan. New Year's, you're on your plan. But Christmas Day itself, you'll have your blowout or you'll have your one thing. Ultimately, this has got to come down to you trying to determine what is going to be best for your overall compliance. So if there's any risk that this indulging more and more in a couple of days around Christmas could lead to the proverbial slippery slope in the back end of December, early January, then really limit it. Then maybe just limit it to one day, Christmas Day itself. But if you feel comfortable and controlled with your relationship with food, and you already go into the end of December having lost 5-6 pounds at the start of December, in the middle of December, you don't need to sweat it to have a couple of days because you trust yourself that you can get back on track really from the 26th. So sort of outlining all the options there, but hopefully this helps. And I think that is it. 45 minutes in. Better eat some dinner, but hopefully this was useful. This is my winter weight loss plan to help you lose 10 to 15 pounds in the next 3 months. Drop your questions and comments down below. What did you enjoy about this the most? What was the one tip or hack here that really stood out to you that you're going to start implementing? Or just generally let me know any questions you've got. Hopefully the free information here that I'm always giving in my live streams, in my regular YouTube videos, over on my Instagram page, hopefully that free info is useful. If you are tired of trying to figure out this whole weight loss this whole weight loss thing on your own, what to eat, how much to eat, how to fight the cravings, etc., visit veganslimandsustain.com. I'll drop the link below, but simply type into your browser veganslimandsustain.com. And if you're interested in joining my program, you have a look at the testimonials, the case study, the results I'm getting for clients there, learn a little bit more about the program. And if it does resonate with you, if you are interested in learning more, you can fill out the form at that page at veganslimandsustain.com. Fill out the form. I'll be in touch with all the details about my Slim and Sustain program and to see if you would be a good fit. So that's if you need a little bit more support and accountability and help from me. And I just want to say very quickly here, there's a lot of other people in this space. I am going to blow my own trumpet here a little bit, but I mean, it's their preference and it's your preference who you work with if you're looking to hire a coach right now. There's a lot of people in this space that they outsource all their coaching and they hand you over to an assistant coach, which is all fair and good so long as they're upfront about it. But there's a couple of people that aren't, that you think that you're joining a program to work with them. And after you've paid, after you're inside, you're like, oh, yeah, I'm just palmed off to an assistant coach. I just want to say there might be a day where I expand my team, but I'm going to be fully transparent about it when it happens. I'll have a pricing tiered strategy so you can work directly with me, which will be a little bit more than working maybe with one of my assistant coaches. And that's if I want to build the Slim and Sustain program, if I am comfortable with delegating, which I'm not 100%, but if I do one day become more comfortable with delegating, that's what I'll do, but I'll be transparent about it. I want to make clear right now, if you're signing up with me anytime soon, you're working with me. It's one-on-one. I'm taking care of you. I'm responsible for you. You need to turn up as well and be honest with me and work hard. But it's me who's on your team fighting in your corner. I'm not just palming you off here and there, I'm not just putting you on a course. There are trainings in my program, but it's not a done on your own, do-it-yourself DIY course. You're working with me and I'm overseeing your whole journey to lose 10, 15, 20, 25 pounds or more and teach you what it takes to actually ultimately get to your ideal healthy body weight. So if you don't get to your ideal healthy body weight on Slim and Sustain, you certainly have the tools, the habits, the understandings, the mindset, etc., the knowledge to go on and do that in the coming months and year or so, depending on how much weight you've got to lose. So I just wanted to say that very quickly here. Sorry to spiel on, but you work with me on my program. There's none of this outsourcing nonsense. So if you like me and you resonate with my communication style, what you imagine my coaching style to be, if you see the conversations I have with my clients and you think, yeah, this is a bit of me, I just wanted to reassure you, you do work with me. So if that all resonates, let's do this. Let's do this and let's get a head start on the year and you can guarantee your results. Again, like I say, hopefully the free info here was helpful, but if you want to actually guarantee that you're getting results at this time of year when people just capitulate to bad habits, veganslimandsustain.com, fill out the form there. I'll be in touch to see if you're a good fit and give you all the details. Okay, thanks, folks. I'll see you. I was about to say tomorrow. Will I do one tomorrow? Who knows? Who knows? But certainly by the end of the weekend, there'll be another live stream up. Okay, see you soon. Take care.